because we are only working on the skull. Let's actually just look at it from the side so that we can see how exactly it should supposed to look like from the side view. So first thing that you can see is we have to push this part out. As you can clearly see, wait, as you can clearly see over here, this is supposed to be out, and this is also supposed to be out, but this part is supposed to go back in. So we're gonna have to do that, and let's also use the clay strip brush to remove some of the volumes, and I'm gonna show you why. So you can see this particular part does not actually exist. So let's just do that. Even though I've talked about that we don't really need to remove this, but right now I'm removing it because we can actually change all this stuff later. So right now let's just do that, and by doing this we are also gonna be able to create some cheekbones and stuff. So let's just do that. So this is what we have, and we're gonna have to create the cheekbones now. So for the cheekbones, so the cheekbones are pretty important, and the reason is the cheekbones, this part basically is the part where the whole of the ear is. So you have ears, right? Everyone does. And you have the hole in the ear. So this is the part where the holes are supposed to be. So we're gonna have to do the same. And let's actually just press Control 3. And we're gonna have to do the same. So this is where the cheekbone is supposed to go. And yeah, you can see this is the cheekbone. And now let's actually just add the volume a little bit to get something like this. So in the face, this part is supposed to be the widest part, right? Remember, this is going to be the widest part. And if you were to look over here, you can actually just figure out if things are working or not. For example, we can actually push this back a little bit. And yeah, we can actually do this. And we can also remove some volume from here. And again, this is something that that is obviously not accurate to the final result, because if you have seen the final result, you're gonna realize that that result is not really gonna be looking like this. Now we have this, we're gonna have to create a mouth, and remember the mouth of the Luffy, it's not small, so we need to do that. But let's actually look at the skull first, and we're gonna have to change some of the things. First thing first, we're gonna have to create a break between the bottom skull and the top of the skull. So this is going to be the break, right? We need to make them separate a little bit right now. And you're gonna see that adding this line have already started making the skull a little bit better. Again, we are at the starting phase, so if the skull is not making sense right now, it is totally fine. Whenever you are at the starting phase, it is not really gonna look that good from the start. I am going to make the eyes a little bit bigger actually, and the eyes are pretty big. But yeah, we're gonna be touching all this stuff later. The next thing is the mouth. So for the mouth, if I were to put him on the side view, you're gonna see that mouth is supposed to come out like this, and we don't have that over here, so we're gonna have to add the volume. So let's actually just do that, and yeah, let's just add the volume like this. So this is what we have, and he is actually looking like he have a big smile, not gonna lie. If I were to just draw the teeth, and this is a temporary, by the way, it's not finalized, you can see. So this is, I guess, what we have. Let's look at the Luffy, by the way. So, okay, let's try and match the shape. So if I were to push it down, kind of like this, I guess the smile is making sense. Okay, we cannot actually draw the teeth because he does not like have any, but let's actually just do that. Okay. So you can see this is basically the skull, but right now it is not looking like Luffy's, and we're gonna have to change that. So first thing that we can compare is you're gonna see the shape of his head, and if you were to compare it with ours, the shape of the head is not similar. Like this angle is not equal to this angle, so we're gonna have to change that. And keep all this stuff in mind, by the way. The next thing is, this is supposed to be the broadest part, you can see. But in the Luffy's case, I guess this part over here is supposed to be the broadest part. So the broadest part is gonna go up a little bit. The next thing is, let's see, the eyes, the socket of the eyes. I feel like it is gonna get a little bit bigger. So that is the next thing that I'll change. And let's just do that. So let's just use the grab brush and let's just push it down. And we've already talked about why I am doing this. So I really hope that I don't need to explain why I am doing that. So let's just push it down and let's just look at it from the front. Let's just push this part in a little bit. Now again, we are only fixing the proportions because right now we are not going into the details because it is important to fix the proportions first. Now the next thing that we can actually introduce is we can introduce this volume. So we have this part, right? And we can actually just introduce that. So in order to do that, you can actually just use the clay strip brush and just do something like this and remove the volume from here. So you can see we are basically getting the same thing, but the difference is this is supposed to be a little bit in. So we can actually just do that and we can just push this part out. So if you were to smooth it out now, you're gonna realize we are actually getting this. And it is already looking pretty nice, by the way. I'm already... Okay, so right now you can see in order to make this part thick, I am using the inflate brush. You can use the eye as a shortcut. So I for inflate in order to get this brush. So we have this and we are actually getting pretty close to what we want to achieve, right? But the one thing that I don't really like is this spherical stuff that is going on. As you can see, we have this angle over here and this part is pretty flat. In our case, this part is not flat. So I am just going to put this back to the smooth and just push it back to make it flat as well. So let's just do that. And we have this going on. Okay, we're gonna have to use a brush called scrape brush. And we're gonna have to scrape this part out. We have to flatten this part out basically. So you can see what we have now. And this is something situational, obviously. I've told you that we are not really going to be using many brushes, but small amount of brushes. Okay. So now that we have this, the next thing that you can see is the forehead. Obviously, in our case, the forehead is just going back and there is no volume like this, right? So if you were to look at him, you're going to realize that the forehead is actually pretty big. So you can also see it over here. So we're going to have to do that. We cannot have this kind of forehead, right? So let's just do the same. So this is the first pass of the proportions. I am actually gonna be fixing the proportions a little bit later as well. Don't you think that this is like the final proportion? These are not the final proportions. I am gonna be working on the proportions even after I am done with all these changes. So don't you worry. If you feel like that this skull is not really looking that good in terms of Luffy, then I've told you that I am gonna be working on the skull and I'm going to be fixing all the proportions. Right now, I just want to add stuff. For example, I've added the eyes, nose, the mouth area. So this is basically what I want to focus on. And some small little changes, for example, forehead. Okay, right now we have, if you were to look at all these surfaces, you're going to realize that these surfaces are not as smooth. So we're going to have to fix that. For example, if I were to go over here, you're gonna realize that this particular volume is not really that good. So we're gonna have to push it back in a little bit. Like you can see, we're gonna have to push it back. And it is totally okay if we were to, start pushing it back out in the future. But right now, I just wanna make sure that the skull itself actually makes sense. And it is kind of making sense right now. So let's just make this of it. Let's actually make this a little bit deeper. So is it looking like Luffy? I actually cannot tell. Let's see. So if I were to go over here and we're gonna have to compare it with him. it is not really looking like a lofi because this is supposed to go out a little bit. So I am just gonna do that, and let's just do it. Also, we're gonna have to fix this shape. Oh, by the way, whenever you are creating a stylized character, make sure that your surface is as smooth as you possibly can make them. Don't make all of those like detailed surfaces that you can actually see over here. So we're gonna have to, if we have any, for example, in this case, we're gonna have to just smooth everything out and make sure that the surface itself is as smooth as we can possibly make them. So this is what we have. Is it looking like Luffy now? I mean, I don't think so. One thing that I can do, I can actually push the nose a little bit up and push this a little bit closer. And let's just do that. Okay, so now let's actually start changing some of the proportions. For example, I've actually looked at this image and I've realized that this distance and this distance is low, and this distance and this distance is pretty high. You can clearly see that. So we're gonna have to push this down a little bit, right? And this is something that we are doing in order to change the proportions. I've told you we're gonna do that a little bit later. And let's actually just push it down a little bit so that the proportions from the front at least matches. Now let's also make the cheekbones a little bit like this. And the reason is I basically want to make the cheekbones a little bit thinner. So that's the reason that I'm doing this. So let's just do that. Again, I'm just working on the proportions right now, just trying to figure out what would be the best possible shape for the Luffy would be. The next thing that I actually would like to do is I would like to just create a line over here. So wait, let me just look at the skull. So a line over here, and I basically just want to separate out the part where the teeth are supposed to be touching. So let me just smooth that out now. So we have a pretty clean area to see where the teeth are basically supposed to getting started. And I think the teeth are a little bit too out, but I'll actually just fix that a little bit later. I don't really need to fix that right now. I think the teeth are a little bit out again, but yeah, we can actually fix that later, or I can actually just smooth it out like this. I don't really think that it is that big of a matter. I just want to make sure that I don't ruin any of the bigger volumes. But we can actually do this. And now I want to recreate that smile. By the way, do you know the teeth are pretty flat when you like look at the teeth only, but in this case, because it is kind of stylized, we are going to be creating a smile. So let's just do that. Yep, we have not really drawn the teeth as nicely as we should have, but it's okay, it's gonna work. The next thing that I actually like to do is you can see this part, right? So we're gonna have to do the same. So we need to create some hollow areas first. For example, we can actually create one over here, and I think it would be better if we were to just separate both of these part out. What do you think? I think we can actually just separate the upper part and the bottom part. I think we're gonna be doing that in the future, so that's gonna be easier for us to sculpt. But right now we can actually just give a hint of that. For example, we can just do this remesh, by the way, in order to fix the stretchiness. So we have this going on, and now we can actually just create a smoother transition between the cheekbones, because remember, we want this to be smooth, right? So we can just do it right now. And I think the smooth is a bit too strong, so I'll just select the smooth brush and decrease the strength of it. Now it is better. So this is what we have, and let's see. If I were to look at him, one thing that I am not liking is how flat this front part is. So I kind of wanna add some roundness, and there are two ways. You can either add the roundness in the middle like this. That is also one way. And the other way would have been to just remove it from here. That is also gonna achieve